was that baby? When we think of Jesus, I'm sure we have all heard and read the expression that Jesus is the reason for the season. We've been hearing that expression, I don't know, the last 30 or 40 years. It's become more and more popular. And sometimes, I don't know how you hear that. I hear it a couple different ways. Sometimes it is an expression of joy. Jesus is the reason for the season. And that's a wonderful thing. And then sometimes it sounds a little like there's a condemnation. Do you know that Jesus is the reason for the season? I don't know if you ever hear it that way. I hear it a couple different ways. Maybe it's just me. But no matter what, we are now celebrating Christmas, and Jesus is in the middle of this, and it's useful for all of us to grapple with just who this Jesus is for each of us as we move forward with our lives, celebrating Christmas and all the days of our lives. So what do people mean when they say Jesus is the reason for the season? What do people mean when they say Jesus? Who is Jesus? Are we celebrating the birth of a baby boy? Well, yeah. Are we celebrating a man that grew up to radically change the world in which he lived? Maybe. But whoever is Jesus to us, it's important to understand that this Jesus was ultimately a man who came into the world, holy God, holy man, but a man who came into the world to share God's love with the world, a world that was deeply disturbed and had always been disturbed. We think of Jesus' Father as creator God, creator of the universe, creator of everything. And as Jesus' Father, he comes into a world that is troubling. Humanity's inhumanity toward humanity. It's a problem. It was a problem for the prophets before Jesus. And it's a problem that Jesus had tried to unpack, and it's a problem that we get to continue to grapple with in our own lives. Now, it's reasonable to assume that God would want for humanity to see how sacred humanity is, how valued each person is, how each of us are uniquely gifted and each of us are uniquely broken, and that there's an opportunity for us as a humanity to open our hearts and minds to all people and to explore how God's love works in us, in everything that we do, and how that love is shared with the world, and how we receive the love as well. It's important. You know, the challenge in all this is, as God created the world, we were given free will to pretty much do whatever we want, to either listen to the higher law of creation or to go in a different direction. And we still have that free will. And it's up to us to make decisions. But I think the hope was, in the free will, was that God and Jesus had this extraordinary hope for humanity, that we would be co-creators with God, that we would bring our special gifts that had been given and work together in ways that far exceeded even the vision of Jesus. You know, Jesus said to his disciples, "You will all do greater things than I." And that's the way it's going to be. And that's the way it is. So when we think about Jesus, we think about this Christmas season. It can be kind of a new beginning to understand more intently what Jesus was, what he's teaching, and how we can apply those lessons to our lives and start to, in a sense, transform the world around us. Now, at St. John, what we teach every week is what Jesus teaches us to become his hands and feet. How do we do this in practical ways? How do we understand faith? How do we understand God? How do we understand Jesus? And how do we take those steps in our lives into every situation and become a type of light? And that's very possible. It's very possible. There's not really much mystery to it. The Rabbi Jesus taught of shalom. Everything is shalom. Peace. Peace be with you. And when we look at peace, and we look at that declaration, what that declaration means will be the sum total of his teachings. All of them are accessible to all of us. And that's kind of exciting. Part of shalom is compassion. Compassion, it comes out of shalom. Compassion is God's love working through us to help those who are hurting. Now, the pain could be physical, could be emotional, could be social, it could be all kinds of things, but when we see and recognize hurting people, that pain, we are empowered in some way to come to their aid. The other thing, the good news is, sometimes we're those people who are hurting. Sometimes it's us that needs that love. And we can call out for it. We can make it known that we need help. We don't have to live alone. We can trust that Jesus has already placed people in our lives that recognize and love us and want to care for us. And we need not be too proud, because it's part of shalom. It's part of the great plan. And if we don't take advantage of that, we're losing something. Mercy. Jesus talks about mercy. Mercy is part of shalom. And it really gets down to cutting people a little bit of slack. To not be so darn judgmental. To recognize there are so many sides to the story. And I will tell you, the whole idea of mercy is kind of like the benefit of the doubt. And if we looked at the early church, first 2 centuries of the church, the atmospherics of the church had a lot to do with sharing the benefit of the doubt. Now, they argued a lot about theology, but they loved one another and they cared for one another, and they recognized that everyone in the community that was forming had a different take on things, and that was a good thing. Justice. Justice is part of shalom. It's a big teaching in shalom. Maybe, well, it's very big. You can read the Bible. It's all over the place. But here is the thing about justice. When we look at justice in the world in which we live, we are invited to pay unique attention to pain and suffering in the world that exists because of the greed of others. It exists. It is real. There are people who will tell you it's not. And Jesus would say to anyone who says that, "Get behind me, Satan." It's real. But here's the thing. We, with our free will, recognizing in this whole motif of shalom, justice is one of the gears, it's one of the ingredients. We have the opportunity to learn. When we hear about human suffering, when we hear about injustice, we can study it. We can learn about it. We can become educated about it. And then we're invited to do something about it. A couple more. Grace. You've heard the word grace. Grace is a part of shalom, and it means living a generous life. Be exceedingly and abundantly generous with your financial giving. Not to hurt you, but just let some of that happen. To be able to share what we have with others. Not only your money, but yes, your money, but also your time and your talent. The talents that God has given us that we have now an opportunity to share with others. And it's an exciting piece when we do that, when that generosity is sparked in us, how much we are fed as we feed others. And finally, forgiveness. It's a big one. Forgiveness. Jesus recognizes that for us to be able to forgive those who have hurt us, to let it go, it opens us up in a variety of different ways because none of us is perfect and all of us are in need of forgiveness, right? Some of the forgiveness we need to do is to forgive ourselves. And so when we think about Jesus, we think about this piece. And that's what we tried to do, to explore this and to work it. And it's not easy, and it takes some rigor, and it takes a regular effort at practicing. But in the end, the good news is we're all capable of accessing the plan of Jesus. We're all capable of accessing the great shalom, taking it into our own hearts and minds, and sharing it with the world as we are able. As we are able. Now, the world can go off its hinges, and it always does. Every generation claims this is the apocalypse, this is the end. For the last 2,000 years, I don't know how many apocalypses there have been. There will be many more, and the world gets pretty wild, doesn't it? But here's the thing, you don't have to get swept away with that stuff. You don't have to get swept away. Because each one of us has the potential to be God's hands and feet, to be light, to be hope, and to be able to share that with ourselves and the world. And that's one heck of a gift. And that's the gift of Christmas and the reason for the season. Amen.